Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderful Gaming. In today's video we're going to look at getting started with the Maggotkin of Nurgle Daemons in Age of Sigmar Warcry, using the Grandfather's Gardener's Warband box set from Warhammer Underworlds as a starting point to build up a full functional 1000 point warband. The Grandfather's Gardeners are a quartet of plague bearers under the direction of Sigmar Potbelly. They work tirelessly to cultivate Nurgle's plagues throughout the mortal realms with aid from various demonic flies and ticks. With their foul gardening tools, they plant disease seeds throughout the realmscape that will blossom into putrid growths. Today's video is sponsored by Gap Games, a fantastic miniature wargaming store in Queensland, Australia. They stock a wide variety of miniature wargames from all things Games Workshop to some of my personal favourites, Conquest of the Last Argument of Kings, and all things Modifius wargames as well. Use our affiliate code in the link below to help support both this fantastic store and the channel as well. And so, what's in the box? Leading the warband is Sigmar Potbelly. This is a pretty solid Nurgle demon character. First of all, you are going to have a nice 25 health with 4 defense. You've also got 2/5 on damage with strength 4, so a decent okay profile all up, and a 2-inch reach is nice there as well. But once we start looking into the abilities, we've obviously got things like Disgustingly Resilient, which is the army-wide sort of Nurgle ability where we can remove some damage points for a nice little double. We've got Growing Infections as well, which then becomes one of the special abilities where we can give the fighter a cycle counter and roll the dice. If the roll is equal to or less than the value of this ability, you get an ability dice you've spent to use for the ability at the same value. But for the rest of the battle round, you add one to the critical damage value of the fighter's melee weapons for each other cycle counter they have. Cycle counters are not discarded at the end of the battle round, so you can sort of keep gathering up this damage as the game goes on. Now you've also got some other abilities as well, where the Grand Cycle of Decay is your main one, where each friendly fighter's cycle counters must be given to another friendly fighter on the battlefield with the Grandfather Gardener's rune mark, and each fighter may only be given cycle counters once each time this ability is used. So you can sort of spread out those cycle abilities. And you've got some basic sort of abilities we've got for Nurgle. The Menacing Overseer, we can add one to the attacks by visible friendly fighters while they're nearby as well, is one all your leaders will be able to use. And this is pretty cool because it does mean you can combine this with other sort of abilities, as it's this character using the ability, you'd get +1 attack from being near them, and you could still use something like an Onslaught or Rampage and get those bonuses for that as well. So all in all, he is a fairly solid leader to start your force out with. And so next up we've got Bug-Eyed Drypterus. Now this is a fairly solid fighter. You've only got 2/2 on your damage. There is no additional sort of critical damage value on this fighter, but 15 health is nice to have there with a defense of 4, so fairly solid. Well, we compare this to something like a generic Plague Bearer that we've got access to. This does, get a little bit more damage. You lose out on some of the crit, but you do have more health than these, and you're not overly more expensive than them. For another 25 points on top of Plague Bearer, you are getting 50% extra wounds, which is pretty solid. Now, you've got a lot of the same abilities we've already talked with Sigmar Potbelly already, with all the cycle counters and all of that, with Growing Infections and that, so you're able to sort of get some extra damage there, which is pretty nice. Next, we move on to Maggotkin, who is actually sort of a lesser version of a Plague Bearer. You've got less damage on this fighter. You do have, the same sort of stats other than that. You've got 10 health, you've got 4 defense, you're only 3/3 with 2/2 on your damage, so you do more damage on your base hit, but you don't have the critical damage of 4, which a normal Plague Bearer would have. But all in all, you are that 5 points cheaper, and you do get access to all the abilities we've already talked about with the other fighters as well. And Slunge is much the same. This is going to be another fighter that is slightly cheaper. You are going to have that profile of more damage on your base attack but less on the critical value, and of course you've only got the 3 attacks at strength 3 as well, which is the same as a regular Plague Bearer, so you're not that upgraded Plague Bearer, sort of like Bug-Eyed Drypterus sort of is, I guess. Now lastly, we have Squat. This is the bloat flyer that travels around with a warband. Only 6 health, defense 3, so this is relatively cheap, and it does only have 4 inches of movement, which is, you know, faster than Plague Bearers, albeit, who are just that base 3-inch move, but doesn't make him much quicker. Squat's big thing though is he does have access to his own special ability, which is going to be his Sucking Proboscis, where you can pick a visible enemy fighter within an inch of them to be the target, roll a dice, and allocate a number of damage points equal to the roll. However, if you allocate 5 or more damage points to the target using this ability, that fighter is taken down. So, a pretty powerful ability in all honesty. You know, a 5-up to instant slay anything. This could be a really powerful ability. Obviously, it is very frail, but it is a nice little one-shot chance to do something. Now looking at where to go next, the first thing we're going to look at is the Sloppy Bile Piper. This is a Nurgle hero, 2-4 on your damage, that's slightly better Plague Bearer sort of profile. You do have 20 health there, which is nice as well, and strength 4 is nice to have as well. But the big thing we're taking this model for is the abilities it's going to grant. The Jolly Gut Pipes ability, I think, is one of the most essential things you can have in Nurgle Daemons. I'd be almost using a double every time I can with this. Until the end of the battle round, you add one to the move of friendly fighters when they start a move within 7 inches of this. This is incredibly powerful and important for the warband just to get that extra movement. And once again, like some of the other abilities, it can be combined with a rush from the fighter that's within range to get an extra 2 inches of movement. Obviously, making sure you're sort of positioning this model as far back, far forward as possible, so that your other fighters can move into its range, move sort of through its range, and then out of it to get the most maximum movement they can. The other hero fighter we're going to look at bringing in is the Spoilpox Scrivener. Now, what's cool here is this is slightly better as a fighter. So you've got 22 health, but you've also got strength 5, only 2 attacks, but 3/5 on your damage, and you do have a 2 hex range as well. You've got a couple of different things here, which I think is what I like about this fighter a lot, is he's pretty well rounded in what he can do. You first of all got your main ability, which is the Grandfather's Blessing. We can add one to the strength of melee attack action by fighters within 7. So you've got that buff that it can provide, much like your Sloppy Bile Piper. But you've also got Disgusting Sneeze, which is a direct damage dealing ability, which is really cool. You roll a dice equal to the value of the ability, reach 2+, allocate a damage point. No, it's not an over amount of damage, but in case you're not sort of needing the buffs and stuff like that, you can just deal some direct damage for a triple, which is nice. The last thing we're going to look to add is the Beast of Nurgle. This gives us a really hardy piece. Nurgle are just hardy to begin with. They do have 4 inches of movement, which is that slightly better Nurgle profile. It sounds weird to say 4 inches is slightly better, but it is. You've got 4 attacks at strength 4, 2/4 in your damage, quite a bit more damage coming out of it than some of the members of Grandfather's Gardener, but you also have 30 health with that defensive force, so he's going to be extremely tough to take down. You do have some special abilities with these guys. The big one here is your Acidic Slime Trail, where you pick a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter. This fighter makes a bonus disengage, and then allocate a number of damage points equal to the value of this ability to that fighter as well. So a good way to sort of get this model moving out, going and doing some objective based stuff, and then still doing some damage on the discharge as well. And so our warband is going to consist of our 3 heroes. This is going to be Phlegmus Potbelly, and then the Sloppy Bile Piper and Spoilpox Scrivener. Now, one thing we are going to do is we do have a couple of points spare, and we're going to go for the Savagery Divine Blessing upgrade. We're going to put this on Phlegmus Potbelly, and we're also going to put it on the Sloppy Bile Piper as well to give that fighter a little bit more punch. For other fighters in the warbands, we're then going to have, obviously, the other members of Grandfather's Gardeners in Bug-Eyed Dripteris, Slunge, Maggotkin Stroog, and they'll be joined by Squaw and 2 Beasts of Nurgle. We hope that this video was helpful in getting you started with Warhammer Age of Sigmar Warcry, and that it was able to give you some ideas and inspiration to start your own force in the game. If you have any other questions at all, please comment them down below and we'll endeavour to get back to you. And while you're there, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe and join our Discord server as well, linked in the video's description, for all our future Warhammer Age of Sigmar Warcry content.